Good morning. Today's March the 27th. E. David Smith here. And what's going to be next with coronavirus and the measures, the public health measures being demanded by public health officials? Americans are obviously divided. Many are terrified by the threat of a deadly virus spreading from person to person, and they read reports of people who unfortunately are ill and they should have a speedy recovery. There's people that are saying there's too little, too late. Then there should have been much greater, faster draconian measures from the government. There's people that are saying, this is really a pain, but we'll get through it, and they're willing to accept whatever the public health officials demand. Then there's people who are concerned what happened to the First Amendment, the Second Amendment, the Fourth Amendment, and so forth. And then there's obviously people who see this as part of the apocalypse, not just whether some think it's the virus of the apocalypse, and some people think it's the government crackdown, the totalitarian government, which is an apocalypse. So the question is, what's going to be next? And one way to find out what's going to be next is to read the newspaper. And the way to read the newspaper is to look for what are called trial balloons, where ideas are floated and put into the public consciousness in advance of their actual implementation in order to create a fertile ground for people to start to accept that. So, that's something that is even worthy of discussion as a measure, and then there's kind of a debate, yes and no, and so forth. And then when it's finally implemented, most of the population is ready to accept that. So one great place to actually watch this happening is in the Wall Street Journal. A number of days ago, there was an article just before the big crackdowns in the United States and the quarantine measures, the stay-at-home orders and so forth. There was an article in the Wall Street Journal that was effectively praising as successful the Chinese measures to limit the spread of the disease. And when I read that article, I said, oh no, here we go. This is a sign that the article writer in the Wall Street Journal, who's getting his information from public health officials and certain selected doctors, is going to kind of prep us for this implementation of Chinese measures. So that immediately afterwards, 2-3 days later, all of a sudden the state government started rolling out and the cities started rolling out these massive measures that very much look like China. Now, while some people are very cheered on by the fact that the headlines say things like the president is considering a partial reopening, which then sends the stock market up. At the same time, on the day, that's on the 26th, on the 25th, there's an article on the front page of the Wall Street Journal, and it says, West takes wrong lessons from Wuhan. Now, if you read that article, you will see that it is what it's saying is that the West, in creating these social distancing measures, is taking the wrong lessons because that's not what really worked in Wuhan. What really worked in Wuhan was actually quarantining forcibly all the people that showed any kind of symptoms or tested positive. So whereas in the United States right now, anyone who is testing positive and either has low symptoms or no symptoms is going home, being sent home. A lot of people are being told not to test because they have fevers and so forth, some of the symptoms, so they don't test at all by doctors' recommendations. All those people are free to live their lives at home. However, what China did was at a certain point they started to build hospitals and mass quarantine people who had either no symptoms and were positive or had mild symptoms. And were not really qualified for hospital admission and did not require it, but they were quarantined and removed from their families and put into those centers. So this is what the Wall Street Journal is telling us as a headline, that West is taking the wrong lessons from Wuhan, meaning the West is taking the lesson that social distancing works, and that's not the real lesson. The real lesson is the public health officials should have the right to take anybody who has any kind of symptoms or any kind of positive, either positive with no symptoms or symptoms with no positive, and then be able to quarantine them against their will in what they call hotels. And quoting over here, it's very interesting. You've got to read the details because, but see the big picture. Don't get caught in the details. They quote over here a infectious disease expert at Columbia University from the United States who says, his name is Ian Lipkin, who says he's been advising health officials in China, says the U.S. should immediately implement a nationwide stay-at-home policy, then move to a, quote, stratified isolation system, end quote, until a vaccine is ready, which means that anyone who has stratified isolation system, according to the Chinese model, is those that need to be in the hospital because it's life and death, they go there, and those that have symptoms or test positive should be isolated from the rest of the population. So, and the key word is over here, according to this expert, It should be until the vaccine is ready, which most estimates say 12 to 18 months. So we're talking about the next level that public health officials are leaning for, and the Wall Street Journal is priming us for, is this type of stratified isolation. Now, you may say, if you particularly fear this virus and you are concerned and feel that public health measures are warranted, that perhaps the Chinese numbers prove that or show that it works. And the answer is to that, and that's a very important point, is that the Chinese numbers come from a Chinese communist country. And the general principle, the starting assumption of any information from a communist country is that it is 100% false. It can sometimes include true information in order to transmit false information. But all information from a Chinese communist government and a communist country in general is 100% false in order to create some sort of result in their objectives. So our responsibility is to recognize that the numbers cannot be believed. We cannot believe the number of people that were infected and the number of people that are not infected. They may be over-exaggerating, under-exaggerating, playing with the numbers, increasing, decreasing at will to create the appearance that they had success through the totalitarian measures, and then leading all kinds of experts to think that that's is the way to go over here. So this is the kind of wild west of basis of statistics, in addition to the fact that the numbers could just be made up completely. So we have to be on the alert for all the false information, and really it should be discounted because it's not reliable sources of information. And we can discuss it another time. How do you get reliable information on the coronavirus, given the general lack of any information and a tremendous amount of speculation? But right now, the point I'm making is that if you want to know what is being predicted next, or I shouldn't say predicted, what is being promoted next as a public health measure, God forbid, they are indicating, and there are experts in the United States and in England who are saying that this should be implemented. And therefore, it's really very important for you to be aware of that and make a decision, is that something that you are willing to accept? And everyone should have a wonderful, blessed day and be healthy. Thank you.